The message that arrived when it was already too late. At exactly 3:12 a.m., Ethan woke up suddenly with a strange heaviness in his chest, the kind that makes you feel like something is wrong before you even understand why. His bedroom was dark and silent, the city outside completely asleep, yet his phone was glowing softly on the table next to him. A single notification waited on the screen, and when he saw the sender's name, his body froze, because it belonged to someone he was certain could never message him again. Mia had died 8 months earlier, in what everyone called a tragic but simple accident. It was a rainy night, the road was slippery, and her car lost control on a sharp turn. The police report was brief, the explanation clear, and the case was closed within days. Friends cried, family mourned, and life slowly returned to normal. But for Ethan, something had never truly settled since that night. He had attended the funeral, stood in front of the closed coffin, and listened to people say kind words about Mia. He had nodded, thanked them, and acted like a man who had accepted reality. What no one knew was that Ethan carried a quiet guilt that followed him everywhere, something he pushed deep inside and never allowed to surface. The message on his phone had no preview and no explanation, only a recent timestamp that made no sense at all. It claimed to have been sent just minutes ago, which was impossible. Ethan tried to convince himself it was a glitch, a technical error, or an old account reactivating by mistake, but the fear in his chest told him otherwise. After several seconds of hesitation, Ethan opened the message. The words were simple, but they hit him harder than he expected, speaking about waiting and disappointment in a way that felt deeply personal. His breathing slowed as memories flooded his mind, pulling him back to the night everything changed. That evening, Ethan and Mia had argued over something small and meaningless, the kind of argument couples forget after a few hours. Pride had kept him from calling her back, and irritation had convinced him that silence was the best response. When his phone began vibrating later that night, he saw her name on the screen and chose to ignore it, telling himself he would answer later when things calmed down. As another message appeared, Ethan's heart began to race. This one mentioned details that no one else could possibly know, including the fact that he had been awake and online at the exact moment Mia was desperately trying to reach him. He remembered lying in bed, scrolling mindlessly through his phone, fully aware of her calls and still deciding not to answer. The messages continued to arrive slowly, each one peeling back another layer of truth. They described fear, pain, and the quiet hope that someone you love will show up when you need them most. Ethan felt sick as he realized that the official story he had been told was incomplete. According to the messages, Mia had not died instantly, as everyone believed. She had survived the crash for several minutes, injured and trapped, surrounded by darkness and silence. Her phone was damaged, but notifications still appeared, and she kept checking the screen, convinced that Ethan would call back and tell her everything would be okay. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, unable to move, as the realization crushed him. While he was safe at home, choosing silence out of anger, Mia was waiting in fear, believing that the person she trusted most would come for her, or at least answer the phone. The final part of the message explained something even more unsettling. These messages were not being sent by her spirit, nor were they the result of anything supernatural. They had been written weeks before the accident and scheduled on a night when Mia felt emotionally abandoned, long before she ever imagined her life would end. On that night, she had realized something painful and irreversible. She understood that Ethan's silence hurt more than arguments, more than harsh words, and more than distance. She scheduled the messages not to accuse him, but to express a truth she feared would never be heard otherwise. When the conversation ended and the account deleted itself, Ethan was left staring at an empty screen. The room felt colder, the silence heavier, and the weight in his chest unbearable. Nothing dramatic happened that morning, and the world outside continued as usual. But something inside Ethan broke quietly and permanently. He went to work later that day, spoke to people, smiled when required, and lived as expected, yet every moment felt hollow. The knowledge that he could have answered, that he could have been there, followed him like a shadow he could never escape. Some messages are not meant to scare or confuse. They exist to remind us that ignoring someone can leave wounds deeper than death itself, and that sometimes the hardest thing to live with is not loss, but the certainty that you had the chance to be there and chose not to take it.